Welcome to the Broad Ripple Village Podcast. My name is Brian Wheat, your host, podcasting from Village Recording Studio right here in Broad Ripple. My guest today is David Allee, owner-operator of the Jazz Kitchen. You've always had a love for music, I assume.
Yep, absolutely.
Does that go all the way back into your even younger childhood before high school?
Yeah, well, my dad's a professional jazz pianist,
Right.
Fairly nationally known, and
Right.
Is actually teaching over at CCM over at Cincinnati Conservatory of Music. And,
Okay.
But he's had a big band and small groups for as long as I can remember, and I, obviously hung out with his friends that were musicians, and so, the bug kind of bit me, and I guess I get it pretty honestly in that direction. Heard a lot of John Coltrane, a lot of Cannonball Adderley, and growing up Miles Davis. So musically, I definitely caught the bugs.
I know you're a Broad Ripple High School graduate.
Broad Ripple High School grad, 87.
87.
Yep.
Okay. You played trumpet.
Yep.
In the band. Then.
Yeah, I was in the jazz band, orchestra. We had a great band program at that point, and Rudy Fennell was the director over there, and he did a fantastic job of, keeping us moving and keeping us motivated, and the band sounded great. I mean, it was a great sounding band. Won quite a few awards at different jazz band competitions, and it's funny, having the Jazz Kitchen. Also, I see teachers 10 years later that were, that I thought were, 70, but we're actually only about, 30,
Isn't that funny?
32,
when you're younger and older people seem so much older.
That's right.
They really are. So you graduated from Broad Ripple High School, and then what did you do after that? Well, what led you finally to the jazz, opening the Jazz Kitchen?
A friend of mine that was in jazz band with me in high school, and I had seen the place at 54th and College available. And, it was never I wish there were a better story, but there was never like this grand plan to, open a jazz club and do this. So, but, we saw it, and we were young enough that we were foolish enough to do these things.
Isn't that great?
And, but, we worked hard. We had a lot of friends that came in and chipped in just to make it happen. And we were very, very novice and very naive about what the business was about. But we both had love for the music, and, quickly realized that we needed to become more proficient in food and drink, the beverage side of it. So,
that's interesting. So obviously the love of music drove you to consider that, but then obviously there's the business side that says, oh, we got to make money doing this too.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I think through the years, really, the ability to stay open is not in the cover charges. The bands have to get paid, so that's one way that they get paid. But to keep the doors open, it's got to be food and drink. I think, that's from my perspective.
Well, you've obviously been.
We've tried it the other way.
Long, yeah. So what was the name of the place? Was it the Place to Start?
That's right. Yeah, Place to Start.
I remember that.
In fact, Pete Pipkin and Pat Holland, who owned the Place to Start, were the owners of the building when we opened. So, so they had closed, and Kilimanjaro was wedged in between them for 4 or 5 years, and then we came in '94.
Okay.
And grabbed the space then. But Pete and Pat were our landlords for probably the first, 8 or 10 years that we were open. Eventually, they sold to the Piano Merchant guys, who were next door to the club there.
Yeah.
And they're continue to be our landlords now.
Oh, okay.
But,
that's who it is. Okay.
Yeah. And so it's great. We've had people who all along have been, especially supportive of live music. Obviously the Piano Merchant, they're vested in, live music and how that works, and they've since closed. But then you add that with Pete and Pat, and they were, fervent jazz aficionados.
Did they offer you some advice there since they ran the,
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. They everybody has the pitfalls. In fact, my dad was kind of like, you shouldn't do this. It's like,
really?
I've seen this, 50 times. It's like, this is not a great path. It wasn't like adamant about it, but was definitely, cautious. The interesting thing, and that we're very fortunate about in Indianapolis, is one, we have a great legacy. There's been a fantastic number of, or a vast number of, world-class musicians that, cut their teeth and are from Indianapolis that kind of informed the whole, Midwest swing, if you will. Indianapolis sound, and so there was a lot of musicians that came out of that. I think back to like the J.J. Johnsons and the Freddie Hubbards and Slide Hamptons and the Wes Montgomerys, and how they kind of helped define a sound that then informed the next generation and the next generation, and obviously the music around them helped with that. But basically what I'm saying here is that we had fantastic support. We've always, the musicians have always embraced it, always gone out of their way to celebrate it, bring great products in there, tell their friends,
So can you elaborate a little bit more on the influence of Indianapolis to the jazz, music genre, I guess?
Right. Well, to give you, just a couple examples, I guess one, you think of, Wes Montgomery, and there were about 2 or 3 guys in the jazz guitar world, Charlie Christian being one, Wes Montgomery being a very pivotal figure in that. He kind of redefined what jazz guitar was. And you think about the trajectory of modern day jazz guitar and how, almost without exception, they go through the school of Wes Montgomery, where, I think of people like John Scofield, and I think of people like, Russell Malone, and, just world-class, Pat Martino. These world-class performers that, in a way you could say they kind of owe their sound and their career to Wes Montgomery.
So what did Wes do? How would you describe what he was about? How did he change the current trajectory?
Right. Well, jazz? I think one thing, there was a sound. He was, he had Monk and Buddy Montgomery were his brothers, and together they really, Paul Parker and Pookie Johnson, a few others, that kind of really defined that sound, and it really caught on. So, there's certain things. There's kind of a swing feel that they got. There was also some techniques, his use of the thumb, and how that changed the sound of the guitar versus picking with your finger or a pick. So there was a sonic change that people were gravitated towards. There was also as he got more popular, a lot of people actually credit him with being kind of one of the pioneers of smooth jazz, which has become very huge through the years. And
is that characterized by a little more melody, I guess?
A little more melody, a little smoother, a little more easy listening. Kind of almost a blend of pop and jazz. In fact, he was on the pop charts, back in the '60s. So okay. He was able to kind of cross over that whole. He was on A&M Records, actually. So A&M Records was Herb Alpert. And then people think of the Herb Alpert and Tijuana Brass. And it was kind of Wes that was able to not convince them, but kind of show them through his music that instrumental music could also be the popular music.
Yeah.
And so, you think of Tijuana Brass, they were very popular at the time. Chuck Banjoni was on that label. He was very popular, talking about 80s, about, maybe 20, maybe not quite 20, maybe 12 to 15 years after, Wes passed in, I think, 68. So, he kind of not only, kind of did this straight ahead jazz world, but also kind of this more popular music idiom as well. And then you have people like, Slide Hampton that were, very influential with bands like Maynard Ferguson and his own writing, was a close friend of Dizzy Gillespie's and really contributed to that band. Then you've, let's see here, we've got J.J. Johnson, who more or less, was the Charlie Parker of the trombone at that time. You think of bebop and how it was kind of forming in the 40s, and it's J.J. Johnson, it's
and those were they all from Indianapolis?
They were all from Indianapolis, yeah.
And those are some big names. I recognize.
Well, not Dizzy, but definitely JJ. Yeah,
those are.
And then one of my favorites, being a trumpet player, is Freddie Hubbard, and he was definitely a part of not only the pop music of the day, but kind of redefined jazz trumpet at the time, was kind of the next level of the Miles Davis, Dizzy Gillespie, Clifford Brown era. So, while maybe not in mainstream, American music, but certainly within the jazz world, they're almost as revered now as much as they were back then. So they've really, their staying power has been phenomenal.
That's incredible. You don't hear what you just talked about very much in the, just in the big scheme of things about Indianapolis. You know? So it's great to get that word out that, hey, Indianapolis was a music, it impacted music, and there people came out of here that really had a huge impact on it.
Well, even another one that, just comes to mind. So there was Reginald Duvall Sr., which was a band leader and was kind of instrumental in helping get the Walker Theater off the ground.
Oh, okay.
But, he also taught Hoagy Carmichael a ton about jazz, and we think about, what Hoagy Carmichael's done to the music world, but really, if it were not for this jazz guy, operating on Indiana Avenue, Hoagy may have not been the composer or I'm sure he would have been great, but certainly there was he absorbed something during that time that took him on definitely a jazz trajectory. So,
and there's really very few clubs here in Indianapolis that play jazz. So you're kind of in a league of your own in terms of jazz 7 nights a week, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, there's a Chatterbox downtown.
Right. That's the one I'm most familiar with.
Yeah, Madam Walker puts them on every once in a while, although they're going through a big renovation right now in the next couple of years. But and then you'll see where they'll kind of pop up. There'll be the parks put on some concert series with a lot of great local bands. There's some things down there at the State Museum, and they put on a canal series. It's great. Animals and all that jazz at the zoo has always been a great summertime thing. But as far as the 365s, experience, the Jazz Kitchen's kind of, us and the Chatterbox are probably the two that present the most frequently.
Sure. Now let's go back to that first day you opened up. Was there anything, that happened then that kind of you remember the most about that first year, I guess, when you first opened the doors?
Well, I mean, there was. We had ups and downs. We've been through everything. I actually think that probably a lot of that was more of a function of our learning curve and putting the Jazz Kitchen together. So, in other words, I just don't think we had figured out the formula, especially like on the food side, and understanding that profit from the food was really going to help keep the club portion running.
Sure.
It's not that we didn't have people. It's just we hadn't figured out how to get them to spend enough yet. So, and then we did that by, honestly getting out there and researching it. We would, we'd go to places like Washington, D.C. and New York and just check out how they're doing things. And some of them are just about the music and they don't mess with food. And then some of them were about the food and barely messed with the music. And there were some that were in between, and those were kind of what caught our eye. And we would, actually there's a place, Blues Allee in Washington, D.C., actually in Georgetown, and it kind of opened our eyes to being able to see fantastic music, but also enjoy a pretty decent meal,
Yeah, you guys have great food. I mean, when I'm there, I'm unfortunately not there as much as I'd want to be, but when I'm there, I'm reminded, my gosh, this food's really good. And I suppose obviously the Jazz Kitchen, there was food always. That search and decision to go with having food, was that before the name came up, or did the name kind of drive you? Well,
I think the name kind of drove us there.
With that.
I think we learned what food was as we went along, right? I mean, at the time we opened up and we had pizzas and we had, but they were, nice little frozen pizzas, and they were delicious, but at the time,
sure.
We just, I guess, I was 25 at the time, and I didn't have it figured out. I didn't have it figured out yet. I like chicken wings. I like pizza. I like, turkey melts and, and things like that, quite honestly, I mean, I look back at some of our menus and it's like, I think the wings were like, a basket of wings was like $4, and I'm going, well, that's a lot of $4 to pay the rent, so, so we had to change that model to make it go. But, We watched a lot of Food Network. We tried to learn trends. Yeah, of course. I mean, those guys, people like Bobby Flay and Emerald, they're pretty influential on what we did, I mean, and then, just kind of learn as we go. We've had some good chefs that have come in through the years that help contribute as well. And I think the first guy was more or less a bartender that was a cook but he still had great experience and he had some good recipes, like the Not So Cajun Chicken, that's one of our best sellers. He probably lifted that from a place in, I think, in North Carolina or something like that, and it's been a great dish for us. It's actually, like I said, our best seller. And, but that one stayed. And then, we picked up an etouffee or two here. And, I remember we were kind of like, well, actually, when we went to Blues Alley, we were like, man, the crab cakes there were good. I need a crab cake recipe. And, at the time I had a friend that worked at Ruth Chris. He says, hey, here's a recipe. He says, don't use it exactly, but this will start you on the right path. And it did,
That's great. So in a lot of ways, just like anything else, your personality's coming through and
yeah.
I mean, you like the food that
I want to eat it. Yeah. I want to eat it. Yeah.
Which makes good sense. Yeah.
One of our signature dishes is Spanish paella, and my wife is from Panama, and we've done a Latin night for almost 24 years now.
Has it been that long?
It has, yeah.
That? Wow.
I kind of came to the realization maybe about 6 or 7 years ago that we're definitely an event-driven place. Mm-hmm. So with that, kind of freed me up. I was like, well, I don't have to necessarily always stick with a certain genre. As long as I like the music and I feel like I can get an audience in, then it's probably fair game.
Sure.
I mean, we've had classical performances there. We've had.
I've been there for big band night with the Butler band.
Tango. We had a few great tango bands through the years. Tango dancers. Salsa bands. Blues. We've got a great Tinsley Ellis. He'll be here Sunday. I mean, so I think part of that was that we want to offer those different things because, I feel like the booking's also a reflection of me. I'm not trying to make a statement per se, but I certainly don't mind. I like that guy. He sounds great, man. He'd be great to put in here.
It's good music,
and it's a good room to hear bands in. So I mean, from a size standpoint and an energy standpoint, and then I think we kind of fill a middle ground. We're not the biggest venue in town, but we're also big enough where we can, an artist can travel through and make a few bucks and keep on moving,
Yeah, and you don't discount the locals either. I mean,
no, absolutely not.
Tons of local.
Yeah, tons.
Paul Holdman, I've seen.
Paul's fantastic. Yeah, Tad Robinson, Frank Glover.
Yeah. But the venue, let's talk about that because I think that's one of the most special things about your place.
Yeah.
I don't know how to describe it, but it seems so intimate.
Well, it is intimate. I mean, you're
really
30 feet at the furthest, 40 maybe. So yeah, I mean, it's built that way. I mean, we could double the size and we'd probably lose all the charm that we have.
Yeah.
I mean, and we kind of get into that sometimes because as we're doing some shows, they sell out quickly, and we're like, man, it'd be great if we get another 50 people in here. But then we may also not get those other people because the charm is gone. So,
right. And the acoustics in that room, the bigger you get, the more echo and reverb, and you can do things to correct that.
That's right. Yeah.
But the sound, not only is the stage positioned in a great place, but also that room just sounds good.
Yeah, and we're just kind of fortunate on that. I mean, that was the room that we made a few modifications.
Sure.
We opened the bar up and took the bar into the other room at one point. And, but as far as, some,
you didn't have a
scientific. I mean, we actually what we do is we do put foam on the walls, but we just kind of hear it. We go, it sounds kind of slappy over here. So we'll put some foam up over here. And
tell you what, the times I've been there that I've enjoyed the most is when you've had like big bands in there. And you don't get the chance to hear a big band in a small room.
Yeah. But everybody should have that experience, right?
Oh, yeah, definitely.
I mean, I know that big bands aren't as popular as they once were, but if anybody's listening, just to sit in front of something like that and, close your eyes and just enjoy all that sound that comes and, it's got the power, it's got the finesse, it's,
it's really exciting.
The harmony that really gets created with all that different instrumentation. And most of the time those big bands are really just running acoustically too. A little bit of maybe, like a soloist will have a mic or the piano to get up over the, everything else. But really, it's pretty.
Which is how it was done back in the day, right?
Oh yeah, a lot of times the bass player wouldn't even have an amp. He just had to pull the strings harder.
Right.
That was kind of the deal.
Yeah, and that's why it's so big, right? I mean, they had to design the bass so at least could be heard.
That's right. Yeah.
Now if you have an electric bass, you don't. It's smaller.
Just turn it up.
It's easy.
But they're also, they've got to be musical. They've got to, play like, a concert band would play by listening to each other and making sure that, if the drum drowns out the sax, the pretty sax part all the time, then he didn't do his job.
Yes.
And if the horns play much louder than the piano, then they're not doing their job.
What would you say some of the most memorable performances that you've seen at the Jazz Kitchen?
Well, I think back at, J.J. Johnson was one that he had. J.J. Johnson was not only a kind of the bebop trombone player of the century, he was also a fantastic writer. So at one point he had gone to Hollywood and wrote for, I think he wrote for Starsky and Hutch and some other, kind of more commercial projects, but continued still, playing jazz and writing for jazz as well, but was making I think Quincy Jones brought him out there to do a thing. But anyway, there was a point in time when he moved back to Indy, and he was really looking to, I think he wanted to really have a great show in Indianapolis. So he'd looked at some other places in town, and finally he stopped through, and actually he saw Frank Glover and Claude Sifferlin one night at the kitchen, and he was like, okay, this would be great, And it was fortunate that they were playing because, maybe if it was another band that wasn't quite as proficient, he may have gone, hey, maybe this isn't the spot. But anyway, he approached us and we did 3 nights, packed to the gills.
What year was this?
This would have been like 96, I think. So that would have been real early on. And it was probably also kind of memorable because one, it's this elite jazz superstar that is selecting to come and play at the club. It was also financially beneficial because it there were 3 nights, so 6 shows of just packed houses. And we're talking about, we took all the tables out and just put rows of chairs at that time. So we were really able to make a few bucks on it. And it was a time where we kind of needed to make a few bucks to kind of get down the next stage.
Yeah.
So that would have been one. I think of performers like Ray Brown, the Yellow Jackets. I try to never kind of exclude, like some of the up and coming bands sometimes. Tucker Brothers are pretty hot right now. Charlie Ballantyne's playing great. Like you mentioned, I'm kind of fond of the big bands. My dad has a big band. In fact, he'll be there the 7th of April, and he'll be doing. Really? He's played every anniversary. He was the first night we opened, and we've done him every April 1st or the Saturday closest to it.
Okay, so you have an anniversary show coming up.
We do, yeah.
What day, is that a whole week?
That's April 7th.
April 7th?
Yeah.
And your father's going to be there.
Yeah, that'll be his big band that does it. You should squeak over. Yeah, that'd be great. Yeah,
that sounds awesome.
But yeah, I mean, there's also been, I guess I get as excited about the local shows, I guess, as I do of the national shows. We feel like one thing that maybe we weren't doing a good enough job with is just making sure people knew that people were coming. And then our next thing is, okay, they're coming now. Do you know who they are?
Right.
And if you don't know who they are, then it's kind of our job to maybe, I don't want to say educate, but definitely inform you as to, why do you want to see that show? Why is it that you would do this instead of something else? And so,
I think the emails really help. I'm on your email list, and I get those. They come out once a week.
About once a week, yeah.
Yeah, and I always look through that.
Cool, thanks.
So I think that, and they're written in a way that just looks exciting. You really kind of tout the artist. So kudos for that.
Yeah, it starts with that, and they're our draw. I mean, while we have a good menu and certainly, are very proud of the food that we put out, we also we know good and well that the reason they're coming is to see a show. But yeah, I mean, that I also feel strongly that we need to utilize some of the local guys to accentuate their talent too, because they're no less entertaining than anybody we brought in nationally. I mean, they're world-class musicians in their own right. They some of them have already been there and had the experiences, and some of them just need some opportunities. And it's interesting to see people grow, and especially as there's some special opportunities to do. So we do a lot of kind of Joe Henderson tributes, or
you had a West Montgomery.
We had a West Montgomery
festival, didn't you?
We did. That was actually part of the Jazz Fest that I'm with as well. But But yeah, it we look to try to always celebrate the legacy, but also not do it in such a clamping way that doesn't allow the new sounds to be
And you're ranked, or at least at one point you were put on the list of the 100 top jazz clubs in the world.
Yeah.
And that's pretty impressive especially in the world part.
Yeah. Well, it isn't there isn't a huge pool. I think there's only 100 of us out there, so I had to be. But
okay.
Well, but there's a lot of people doing great music, but in a not at all egotistical way of saying it. We do something that is very unique and very special that I'm sure a lot of cities wish they had. It's obviously the New Yorks and the New Orleanses and the Chicagos and some of the bigger cities, San Francisco. They have phenomenal jazz clubs. In fact, in New York, you probably find 15 or 20 of them. But there's a lot of cities our size that don't have the scene. Don't have. Cincinnati lost their jazz club a few years ago. Louisville had one and kind of lost it a few years ago, and nobody's really stepped up to fill that void. So I think we're kind of fortunate that's.
Do you think the location and the fact that you're in Broad Ripple has had an impact on that?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Obviously the location is heavily traveled.
You kind of go into the neighborhoods of New York or Chicago, and you down in the Village or something like that. You just there's this, it's residential, but there's pockets of business that kind of keep it interesting and keep it lively. And
I think we're recognizing as a city that those corners can be this hub of activity.
That's right.
Drive
the breweries that are down there. There's even down to 46th Street. Those couple new places.
Yeah, it seems to be
popping up.
It seems to be going south, which is great. Do you have any short-term things that you're excited about? I know you've got the Jazz Festival that happens every September, right?
Yeah.
Is that pretty much on the same scale it was last year?
I think so. Yeah, we've been there about 3 or 4 years at the kind of the indoor model, negate the weather. We tried it a few years in the parks, and I think jazz there's a couple reasons for that. One, we needed to mitigate the weather knocking the whole thing out. Sponsors hated it. Obviously people that bought tickets hated it. We hated it, dealing with it. We loved being outside. That's the conundrum or the quandary with the whole thing, is that we love being outside, and we understand that product was fantastic for grabbing new people and introducing them to jazz music. So you might see some changes over the next couple of years, how we maybe integrate a little outdoors without losing our shirt outdoors.
Kind of mitigate the risk of
that's right.
rain.
I think where we're at right now, we feel like we're doing a great job of servicing the jazz fans and maybe people that are on the fringes that may want to check out some new stuff.
Sure.
Where we're probably not as good at right now is to getting new people to the jazz fold. And that's obviously part of our mission with the Jazz, the Jazz Foundation, to make that happen.
Did the movie La La Land have any impact? That was a jazz. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I went and saw that.
I haven't even seen it.
Oh, yeah. Well, when a movie becomes popular, and the guy that's he opens his own club.
Yeah, right.
The jazz club, and he talks about jazz in a way that somebody would talk about food.
Yeah, right.
That's cool to hear because you don't.
That's right.
It's an intricate thing, and to appreciate it. So anyway, I just thought it was a musical and very jazzy music. So. Anytime that happens,
I had to check that. I meant to go see it, and I just didn't because I heard the same thing. It was about doing a jazz club. I thought, well, that's kind of mean. That's my business. So I don't know when this is going to air, but we're with Jazz Appreciation Month kicking in April. One thing that we've put together is a Jazz 101 class.
Oh, cool.
And I say class, it's kind of just a talk. We've invited some professional musicians to come in every Monday during the month of April. And just kind of talk about their experiences, how to listen to jazz, what to listen for, why if you think it sounds like just, complete chaos, how they perceive it and how that, maybe it's chaos to you, but maybe if we explain just a few things, all of a sudden it's not chaos and it's more expression.
Yeah, and you can appreciate it. It's really about jazz appreciation.
It's emotion, which is, what everybody strives for musically, whether or not you're classical or rock or whatever, is to invoke emotion and connect, and so it should be a nice little series on how that. And then International Jazz Day is actually, I think, on the 30th of April, where we're going to try to live stream that. And that's just like the pinnacle, the Herbie Hancocks and the Wayne Shorters and, all the greats of the business. And they do a shows where they're all around the country. Okay. And so we'll air that and have a big party and, and kind of.
That's fun.
Yeah. Just, kind of celebrate it and hopefully get a couple new people into the fold.
All right.
Fantastic.
Thanks a lot, David.
Yeah.
It was great to chat with you.
Success here.
All right. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
All right.
Great. Thanks.
Thanks for listening to the Broad Ripple Village podcast. Be sure to like us on Facebook and you get notified of new podcasts in the future. It'd be great if you could give us a review on iTunes as well, if you feel so compelled. Hope you have a great day, and we'll talk to you next time.